Welcome to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. On this show, you'll receive tools for relational health that you can apply wherever you are on your journey in love. You'll learn how to anchor your security within you so you can co-create balanced, interdependent relationships that fill your cup. Let's get the love flowing. Becoming Secure in Love starts now. Hello, I'm Love Coach Mariya, and you're listening to Becoming Secure in Love on transformationtalkradio.com. Stick with me for the next hour and you'll learn how to touch your own heart. In every episode of this show, we examine the challenges that love can present and explore the various ways to shift from push and pull to peace of mind. The topic of this episode is reparenting. Your inner child lives on inside of you. Is she acting out? Loving ourselves means loving all of ourselves, even the bits we dislike or find difficult. And it also means taking care of ourselves the way we would lovingly care for a young child. Self-love is more than chocolate cake and bubble baths. It's also making hard choices that serve our long-term well-being. Reparenting is so vital for self-care, healing, and growth. It's a process of acknowledging and nurturing and protecting your inner child. And it's also a matter of becoming the responsible adult who can do that. The idea is to love on your inner child, to listen to her, hold her, validate her emotions. I don't have children of my own, but I do really enjoy following sound parenting advice wherever I see it in social media or elsewhere. I save little snippets as just helpful tools for interacting with my inner child. I've been practicing how to guide her and lead her and show up for her. So, now as an adult, now it's your chance to give your inner child what she needed and didn't get when you were her. And now that you are the adult, you can keep her safe and loved, and you can reinforce that and reassure her that she is safe and she is loved. And that's part of what having an internally rooted security does for us. It means that we stop abandoning ourselves for others. And in those acts of self-abandonment, we're abandoning our inner child. And so to say to our inner child, I'm not gonna pretend that the things you care about don't matter to me just so that I can keep someone else in our life, because if I'm abandoning you, then, what have we got? So showing her that you are there for her no matter what helps build trust in yourself, and it helps you build more confidence. It helps you feel more secure that, if somebody else rejects you because, it's just not aligned, you can feel more safe and secure knowing that you're not rejecting you, you're not abandoning you, you're not going anywhere. One of the things I have found helpful is to, again, even though I don't have children, I do have like a maternal energy within me. And there have been instances where it has kicked in for me. And we can harness that energy to guide our well-being. And we can provide for our inner child with stability, discernment, restraint, respect, protection, and care. Some of the notions I've been developing as I pay attention to other, wise parenting advice is we want to parent ourselves with validation and not diminishment. So, very often I will catch myself. One of the benefits of having an awareness practice is becoming more aware of, our inner dialogues. And sometimes, I might notice myself say something like, maybe I'm tired, And I might say something like, oh, it's not so bad. That's diminishing the experience. So what validation would look like is, yeah, I hear you're tired. I understand that. And we're going to keep moving. It's like, you don't actually have to change what you do. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And that's another sort of dichotomy here, is encouragement, not enablement. So that example is in fact a great one, to say, I can validate and say, I get that you're tired. I totally hear that. And you're doing great. Let's keep going. Instead of like, oh, you poor thing, you're tired. Let's stop and go to sleep. Now, it doesn't mean pushing yourself excessively. The other dichotomy that I have noted here is consequences, not criticism. And one of the cooler pieces of parenting advice I came across, over the last year or so was this idea that, trying to get a child to do something that it doesn't want to do, we often fall into sort of manipulative tactics or threats. And so I think the example that was given was a child didn't want to put his boots on to go out for like a walk. And I think it was wet out. And so instead of saying like, you have to, or you're not going to go, or any other various tactics, the consequences approach is just to calmly state what's going to happen and what's not going to happen, so you can say, okay, well, if you don't want to put your boots on, we're going to go on this walk and your feet are going to get really uncomfortable and you're not really going to enjoy the walk. But if that's what you want to do, then that's what we'll do. And obviously within reason, if there's going to be broken glass and it's unsafe, then that's unreasonable. But if they're just going to be uncomfortable, then they can be uncomfortable and then they can learn through consequences. So another thing that I sort of developed for reparenting is this notion of consequences, not criticism. And that came about when I noticed my relationship with accountability has some flaws. In one respect, in terms of interpersonal accountability, I feel like I'm pretty strong in that. But with the typical sort of accountability, like having an accountability partner, I tend to bristle and resist to that. I don't really like book clubs because of it. I've never really done that like accountability partner workout thing because I've had to peel it apart, and I've noticed that there's just a bit of shame in there. It's like, oh, well, if I don't manage to do the thing, then I'm like a horrible person. And then this inner rebel comes out and it's like, well, you're not the boss of me. Like, I'm not going to do it just because you told me to do it. And it gets all funky. So I noticed that sometimes when I'm trying to convince myself to do something responsible, or particularly if I'm trying to convince myself to stop doing something fun or pleasant or comfortable in order to do something responsible, like, for example, I like watching some TV in the evening, Hulu or Netflix or something. And it's easy to binge. And so there's always a point where I have to be like, okay, we can't watch another one. We have to go to bed. And sometimes my inner child will balk at that and be like, but we can just do one more. And so I noticed myself trying to push it a little bit and say like, hey, well, if you don't do it, you're not going to get enough sleep and you're going to be miserable tomorrow. And then I noticed the sort of inner, maybe adolescent in me bristle and feel that bit of shame come up. And then I realized like, hey, as the inner parent, it's not criticism. I'm not saying that there's anything, wrong. You're not a bad person, speaking to myself. If you don't get up and go to bed now, it's just consequences. I'm just pointing out the consequences. And if you are sure that you're willing to make that trade-off, then that's fine. So to reiterate, the sort of reparenting dichotomies that I find very helpful is to reparent with validation and not diminishment. So making sure that instead of trying to, diminish our emotional experiences, that we listen to them and validate them and say, I know you're scared, or I know you're tired, or I get that you're angry. I hear you, rather than it's not a big deal, brush it off, stuff it down. And then on the flip side of that, also encouragement, not enablement. So, I hear you, and it's perfectly valid to feel that way, and we're not going to act on it. So like, let's keep doing our aligned work, right? Let's keep moving in alignment with our values and goals, encouraging that continued perseverance, validate the difficulties and keep moving within reason. Sometimes what we have to do is say, you know what, it is time to take a break. And then the last part is, again, consequences, not criticism. So just reminding our inner child that our inner parent isn't criticizing, we're just providing consequences. I have also a little note here that says, my sweet little girl, I know it's hard and you're doing great. I am proud of you. And that's a wonderful way to encourage without enabling, or saving or rescuing. I like to think of, when I witness other people doing something really difficult, it's like seeing them in a gym and they're lifting some heavy weights and they're like, oh God, this is really hard. Like nobody wants you to run up to them and like take it and be like, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm working out, man. We just need cheerleaders. We just need to say, oh my God, man, that looks really hard and you look like you're doing great. Keep doing it. And that's how we can encourage each other without enabling or, rescuing, perpetuating notions of powerlessness. So I kind of want to move into how to, different ways to commit to ourselves lovingly and help build self-trust. So we're going to take a brief break. And when we come back, we're going to explore more about reparenting. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. You can find me, by the way, online at lovecoachmariya.com. And any women out there looking for community around these topics are welcome to join my free Facebook group, Empowered Compassion, or off social at empoweredcompassion.community. Before the break, we were discussing reparenting our inner child, and we're going to move further into that. So I was mentioning ways to build more self-trust. And one of the best, simplest acts, like brick by brick, to build a foundation of trust is self-commitment through just at least one personal promise made and kept each day. And then take a moment to celebrate, like acknowledge it each time. I think I find a lot of people tend to be, either relatively future focused or relatively past focused. I tend to be pretty future focused, and it takes effort for me. I have to make a conscious effort to look back every once in a while and look at how far I've come. So if any of you are like that as well, definitely, when you make a small promise to yourself and keep it, just give yourself a short little pat on the back, just acknowledging it, like, oh, I did the thing. And it can be like meditating for 5 minutes, or making the bed every day, or just anything that it doesn't have to be big, but something that you can do every day that you don't already automatically do. Or if it is something you automatically do every day, just bring some awareness to it and notice like, hey, this is something that I do for myself every day. And then every time you do it, like, oh, I showed up for myself again. Good job. Something I do with work to pat myself on the back with my day job, I have a little tab that I keep open in my browser that is just a collection of gifts under the celebrate tag. And so it's, like confetti flying or people dancing, standing ovations. And I selected a few that just make me smile. And every time I look at it, it gives me a little bit of joy. And in terms of, making and keeping promises on a daily basis, I also facilitate a virtual ashram that is in service to this, as well as a lot of other self-love and personal development practices. Having a regular routine, again, is something that's really important for like training your nervous system to trust you, to feel safe and reliable with you. Kids need structure, and we have to provide that for ourselves now that we're adults. And another form of structure, in a sense, is boundaries. I mean, boundaries are the limits of our structures. So honoring boundaries with others is part of how we show up for ourselves, but it also is something that we have to do with ourselves. Like managing time or finances. And sometimes the hardest thing about saying or honoring a boundary with ourselves is saying no to ourselves, or really it's to our inner child. And it's something we have to recognize that is important for her sake. Sometimes we have to say no to help her feel safe, and so to give her that structure that she needs to flourish. And we can inspire her with strength and magic. There's so many things that adults get to do that can really just awe children. And even though you're fully an adult, there is still a little inner child in you that you can still inspire. And yes, sometimes we have to say no to her, and we can always do it in a way that, redirects the attention from the thing we're saying no to onto something else. I really like, this is actually something that I picked up from dog training. If you didn't know, in my former life, I was a dog trainer. Rather a few decades ago. You always want to follow up a no with a yes. And in fact, you also should be saying, and I try not to say should, but ideally we're saying yes 10 to 100 times more than we're saying no. So for a dog, for example, every time they're not misbehaving, we say, good dog, look at you. Thank you for laying down. That's a good down. It's a good calm, if you want to put a word to it. And then if they're doing something inappropriate, we can just like say, nope, don't do that. Here, do this. Don't chew on the shoe, chew on this. Don't jump, get treats for being on the ground. And so with ourselves, we can say a similar thing, like, we're not going to do that, but we can do this. And that can be really helpful. On a side note, with boundaries for other people also is, sometimes, especially for recovering people pleasers, such as myself, it can be very uncomfortable to say no to somebody. And there are a lot of ways to say no that can lead to conflict. And that's partly why it can be very scary, is sometimes we can't even imagine a way to say no to this thing that wouldn't end up in conflict, but because we don't really have the tools for alternatives. So one great sort of rule of thumb is that we can say, no, I can't do that, or I'm not available for that, but I am available for this. So a little side note on boundaries. Coming back to the inner child, We don't want to enable her. We don't want to fawn her or, people please her and just let her have her way, because that doesn't build a sense of safety. Children need to know that there is a responsible adult looking out for them. And if the responsible adult, or the supposedly responsible adult, if the adult in the room isn't providing structure, it feels inherently unsafe. So even though it's really uncomfortable for us to, disappoint anyone, including our inner child, it's a bit counterintuitive, but it is a good thing to do. And something I learned about people pleasing is it's really less about actually pleasing the person and more about like avoiding having them become displeased with us. If it were really about pleasing people, it would be a lot more proactive and thoughtful. And so instead of fawning your inner child, like delight her, or even better, delight your future self. Make choices, let's say, no, kiddo, we're not going to do that right now, but we're going to actually go do the dishes so that when we wake up in the morning, we don't have to do that. And we'll feel better. We'll have a wonderful morning. Won't that be fun to go do a nice thing for our future self? So with, the people pleasing stuff that we do too, it's just something to definitely be aware of. It can be very disingenuous, and it's a subtle subconscious form of manipulation, and it can be very detrimental to your own well-being as the way that it tends to self-abandon. And it can also be detrimental to, well, it generally is detrimental to your relationships. And that there is an inherently compassionate nature in us, that, we want to keep the peace. We want to help people be at peace and at ease and in joy. And we can take that compassion and apply that to ourselves and nurture compassionate boundaries and a willingness to allow others, including parts of ourselves, to feel disappointment or disapproval towards us. When we commit to our alignment, and it's just a lot easier to hold space. And it's really important to prioritize that alignment over what I call candy in the moment. The child wants the quick and easy instant gratification, and the adult can institute and incorporate the long-term benefits for the short-term sacrifices or trade-offs, we should say. And the more that we can kind of frame that and explain that to an inner child too in the process, the more easily she will come along with us. So and again, we don't always need to necessarily convince her. Sometimes we can just hold her hand and say, yeah, I know this sucks, but we're going to do it anyway. And sometimes we need to say, you're right, we don't have to do this. So I've mentioned before about an embodiment practice, and it's really important to learn to distinguish between egoic squirming or that like childish rebellion, and on the flip side, like an overextended nervous system or, an actual boundary. And when we connect with our inner selves and our bodies and the energy within, the physical energy in our physical body, we can start to develop more clarity on that distinction and have a better sense of like when we listen to the wisdom of our inner child and when we, parent as an adult instead. Ultimately, though, really, like nothing needs to be forced. If you're feeling resistance, start by seeing if you can just be with that place in your body and kind of reopen the flow and see where your body's intelligence is really kind of directing you to move into. There's a pattern that a lot of folks fall into, especially one that keeps us sort of serving our inner child instead of parenting them. And I'm going to take another break. And when we come back, I'm going to delve into that and bring some awareness to it and give some tips for kind of lovingly working around it. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. You can find me at lovecoach.mariya.com. And as I mentioned previously, I offer I call it a virtual ashram. It's also like a facilitated practitioner space. And I've named it Peaceful Power Practice because that's what I call my own practice. And I've essentially set up a space to facilitate others to follow suit. So anyone looking for, a structured, facilitated container to do this type of work where we show up for ourselves every day and have some camaraderie with others in their own practice, in their own development, learning to root their securities internally, reach out to me and we can talk about enrollment. Before the break, we were looking at different ways to sort of navigate the antics of our inner child and how to create some structure. And I was mentioning a pattern that a lot of folks fall into, women, I should say specifically, because it's called the maiden pattern or the damsel pattern. Similar, slightly different, but essentially it's a bit of an undeveloped emotional maturity. And I've talked before about the Cartman drama triangle. Also, sometimes I call it the blame game or the victim wheel. And this maiden pattern is definitely rooted in that victim mentality and very much like fueled by our modern culture around romance that looks like Disney princesses and rom-coms. And it's this notion where we're sort of waiting to be rescued. And, it's based on this perspective, that we're incapable. And we throw little tantrums when we, don't get carried by others. We feel very disappointed and frustrated, or maybe even despondent when it seems like others think that we're too much. If that sounds familiar, you might have a maiden or damsel pattern. And the sort of cure for it is kind of waking up to the realization that you're not a child anymore and you have an inner child. And now it's your turn to be the mature adult and take care of your inner child and not wait for someone else to do it. When we feel like people can't handle us, that's like life mirroring back to us a reality that what we need to do as a mature adult is show up handled, especially in relationships. Obviously, there are things that we need, that partnership support on. And in life in general, we definitely need support. And it's your responsibility to get the support that you need from a diverse array of resources. And so part of our role as an adult is to be responsible with our needs. And in order to have a really thriving relationship, you need to bring your fulfilled self to it, not an endless pit of need. Your cup will never be filled if it's cracked and leaky. So we need to fortify our foundation so that we can become full and overflowing with love. And to zip up those cracks and those leaks, it requires that sort of responsibility that shows up as a mature adult. It requires taking responsibility for our needs. It requires, knowing when to have some chocolate cake and some bubble baths so that, we can fill that cup too. But we really need to love ourselves unconditionally in order to fill those cracks. And we have to welcome all of the parts of ourselves, even the ones that are resistant to being welcomed, or even the ones that we're resistant to welcoming. We still need to find ways to accept that they're parts of us and welcome all of the experiences that come into our lives without falling into them. It doesn't mean acceptance in this sort of, personal development, spiritual realm. Acceptance isn't resignation. It's really just like the opposite of denial. There are so many things in our life that we so don't want to be there that it's almost like we're in denial of the fact that they are there. And when we start with welcoming and saying like, okay, all right, here's this thing that's in my life. It's all for my benefit. And maybe this is uncomfortable or unsustainable. So I'm not going to stay here, but I welcome it in the present moment. I accept, I acknowledge that this is here, that this is the circumstance that I have to work with at this moment. This is my starting point. These are types of things, that we can do to show up for ourselves responsibly. Another part of that, welcoming our experiences without falling into them is recognizing that our emotional experiences are things that they're occurrences that pass through us, and they're not things that we need to identify with. So a really simple example is like, I'm feeling frustrated versus I am frustrated. It sounds so simple and benign, but on a subconscious level, it's really powerful. Anything that comes after I am is a really powerful statement. I am frustrated. Like I'm a lot of things. And perhaps in this moment, I'm feeling frustrated. Anything that comes after I am, especially if it's just one more word, that is identification. And that's what the ego does. The ego identifies with things. Like it's like a hoarder. It just like collects in all of these things and takes it on as identity and then clings to it for life. And why do you want to cling to emotional experience? They're meant to pass, whether it's good or bad. We want it to flow. We don't want it to like become who or what we are. I don't want to like be frustrated. I can have a frustration, an experience of frustration in a moment. I hope that makes sense. Another thing that I've been playing with is I had a moment actually of imposter syndrome a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed it. I saw it arise and I said, oh, there's my imposter syndrome. Hello there. And I didn't identify with it. I didn't buy into it and make it true, that I am an imposter. And I didn't feel shame about the fact that I still have imposter syndrome. It's like, there wasn't that, oh, it's my imposter syndrome again. I'm never going to get over it. It's just, it is probably something that's always going to come up. It's a pretty human reaction to things. So, oh, there's my damsel pattern. Hello. There's my anxious attachment showing up. Hello there. Um, this is kind of how we can acknowledge and welcome and accept the things that come up in our lives, the things that are parts of us. And when we don't fall into them or feed into them or identify with them, they pass, and it frees us to make conscious choices that are aligned with our values and goals um, instead of our conditioned patterns. And that's how we get to make new choices and get new results in life. As we do this work to hold ourselves accountable, as I mentioned before, we might meet some resistance or rebellion from our inner child or adolescent. And when you need to employ some self-discipline, or when you slip up on an intention, just see if you can unattach your identity from that shame and shift into just some gentle remorse for any behaviors that are not aligned with your values and goals. Grant yourself forgiveness for your past limitations and transform that discomfort into positive action. Let it inspire you to rise to your worth. That is the gift of accountability. I love Brene Brown says, know better, do better. It's as simple as that. It doesn't have to mean anything heavier. Practicing radical self-acceptance enhances our authenticity, and authenticity is what breeds intimacy. This level of honesty is what builds trust with ourselves as well as others. So really, one thing that can be really helpful in, kind of grounding yourself in, a sense of safety to be authentic, just, tying this back into reparenting and to our inner child, tapping into the maternal energy can be really helpful, but it can also be helpful sometimes to tap into that youthful energy. And do you remember how confident we were as kids? At some level, we didn't know not being confident. We were just yeah, man, just get it, do it, whatever. Sometimes, our inner child can serve us with that, harken back to that confidence of your youth and reclaim it. You know what else we can get from our inner child? Play. Play is so important. And it's such a gift that can live on within us through our inner child. And the more we take care of her, the more she can really, bring those things to our life. I'm going to take another short break. And when we come back, we are going to look more into ways to care for our inner child and strengthen our inner resources and fortify our inner foundation. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. You can find me online at lovecoachmariya.com. And any women looking for just some one-on-one support, that is my standing offer. Please reach out anytime. My email is connect@lovecoachmariya.com. We're talking about reparenting our inner child, taking the opportunity to correct any oversights or areas of neglect or even abuse from our parents or caregivers when we were children. And it's not about blaming them or their, imperfections, but it's about stepping into our maturity and our adulthood and taking over as caregiver of our inner child that lives on in us. This is a really crucial act of self-care and self-love. And self-care in general is an act of devotional worship to the life force within you. It flows through you. It animates you. It inspires you. It enlivens you. It's the gift from the universe that allows us to experience existence for a short time. And it's sort of our duty to take care of ourselves and every part of ourselves, including the difficult parts, including the, the spoiled kid in us, the obstinate brat, or the rebellious adolescent. All of these pieces of us deserve to be loved and cared for. And they deserve us showing up for them and making difficult choices as well. It's important to practice saying no to others, to ourselves, to our inner child. And we need to strengthen compassionate boundaries with others and with ourselves. We also need to heal and balance our inner yin and yang. What you want to do with that is fashion them into a mutually supportive partnership in which your yang, the masculine energy in you, builds structures for your yin, the feminine energy in you, to flow in alignment with your values and goals. Doing this will also provide the structured reality that your inner child needs in order to thrive. Sometimes it's difficult to, suss out, how to find that balance, between being overly rigid and, authoritarian or authoritarian. We don't want to be too authoritarian and like overly structured and, black and white and right and wrong and do it now, no matter what. There can definitely be too much of that. There can also be not enough of it if we are too, fluid and just completely go with the flow, follow whatever whim is in the moment, and, commit to nothing other than how we feel in the moment. I serve my poor puppy dog is one of the things I serve. I think she'll be okay. Pardon me, where was I? Right, too much yin is very flaky. Think of it this way. If our body didn't have structure, we would just be a blob and we couldn't move about. So we need some structure. But if we didn't have, our softness and the ability for blood to flow through our veins, right, we also wouldn't really be alive. So these things need to work together. And the ideal role for the yang, the rigid, the structure, is to provide that structure. Like, imagine that your yin is this river that needs to flow, and the yang needs to create a structure for it to be able to flow, instead of just spilling out all over the place. We want our yin to flow in alignment with our values and goals, and our yang provides the structures for that. And this is how we have a functional, system for our inner child to thrive in. We have a creative power within us, and it's in play whether we're intentional about it or not. And another thing that, being a responsible adult involves is being responsible with that creative power and being mindful of our energy, because it impacts others and it attracts matching frequencies into our life. I talked before about, having a leaky cup. There's something to be said about being like energetically leaky. If we don't have, a well-supported, contained structure for our energy, it's going to leak out and bring all kinds of kind of unwanted things into our life from our subconscious. So we really need to stay mindful of what our energy is doing and making sure that we're able to choose in alignment again with our values and goals rather than, our default conditioning. And I will tell you that it's going to feel uncomfortable because we're so familiar with our conditioning. Even if the results are unpleasant, the mind prioritizes the familiar. And so stepping out into something new and different, it's going to feel like we're going against the grain. And again, it's important to have a connection with your body so that you can feel into the energy that's responding to that newness, and to know, what is productive discomfort and how to lean into that gently. And again, develop that intuition so that you can discern which discomforts to lean into and which ones to move away from. When we connect with our emotions in our body, we want to shift out of our mind and its stories about those emotions and just hone in on the physical sensations. Allow them to be helpful entities with short life cycles that will move through you when you don't cling to them or resist them. And this will help strengthen your nervous system and help you feel more grounded, as the tumultuous things of life come and go. See if you can expand your capacity to receive life, whether it's friends having big emotions or partners who can hold space for your messiness, or whether it's, intuitive guidance or divine insight or just pure love. I want to invite you really quickly to do something kind of silly. It might feel silly anyway. And this is a wonderful way to love on yourself and your inner child. Give yourself a hug. Take your right hand and wrap it around and grab your left scapula behind you. And then take your left hand and reach to your right scapula and rub your cheek into your shoulder. And just give yourself a hug. It'll release some endorphins. There's nothing wrong with it. So our time together is coming to an end, and I want to thank you for sharing it with me. Before I wrap things up, I do invite you to consider, as always, what is one way you could empower your compassion? As a reminder, I can be found at Love Coach Mariya, spelled MARIYA.com. Again, I lead a free online community for women navigating the challenges of insecure relationships in the Facebook group Empowered Compassion. I also facilitate a virtual ashram for women working diligently to build the foundations of an authentically aligned life and a balanced interdependent relationship. And that's called Peaceful Power Practice. You can ask me about enrollment. And my standing offer is one-on-one coaching for women seeking guidance and tools for relational health. And the first call is always on me. Reach out anytime via Facebook, my website, or email me at connect@lovecoachmariya.com. And with that, my friends, I bring this exploration to a close. I hope you'll join me again. On the next episode, we'll be exploring ROM scams. In the wild world of online dating, in addition to all manner of unsavory characters, did you know that you might also be getting scammed? Yet another reason to root your security internally. Join me and guest Trish Laub for some helpful insights and encouragement on your journey. I'm Love Coach Mariya, and you are loved.
Thank you for listening to Becoming Secure in Love, from push and pull to peace of mind, with me, Love Coach Mariya. Tune in every second and fourth Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com for an ample set of practical tools that will help you develop internally rooted security, the foundation of a balanced, interdependent relationship. You'll also learn how to empower your compassion, which will alchemize the soul and transform any relationship. Learn more at lovecoachmariya.com. That's lovecoach, MARIYA.com.